Hello, all, and welcome back to another episode of TV and Us, a conversation show about the TV series we just can't stop talking about. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And each season, we focus on a different show, reviewing it episode by episode, and we invite you to watch along with us. Right now, we're reviewing Supacell, and today we're on episode 4, titled Andre. If you haven't watched this episode yet, this is your spoiler alert. Please check it out before continuing to listen to the rest of this episode. Okay, Sarah, kick us off with an episode summary for Supacell episode 4.
After the bailiffs pay him a visit, Andre makes a dangerous decision. Rodney's business slows down, and Dion meets the mother of a missing girl.
All right, let's start off with our episode titles for this episode. What is your choice for episode 4?
Mine is Butterfly Effect.
Nice. Yes. We get a whole explanation of what that is and why it might be happening as we speak in the plot of the show. Thank you, Spud. Thank you, Spud, for that clear explanation, honestly. Succinct.
No, it's nice. It's nice. In case you haven't watched that movie starring Ashton Kutcher from a million years ago named Butterfly Effect, now you know what it is.
Oh, do they really explore the depths of that concept?
I vaguely remember this movie, but yes.
I feel like in storytelling, we just love time travel. You know, there's just littered everywhere because the concept of being able to go into the future and then also to like fix your past. It's so compelling. I too would love to explore a little beyond our bounds of time.
That would be so fun. But that's why we can live vicariously through these characters.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Okay, well, my episode title is The House.
Yes. Yeah. We spend some time in the house.
We do. We really do. And I'm sure we'll get into everything that unfolds at a said house. Okay, let's dive in and share our thoughts about episode 4. We are squarely, fully past the halfway mark. We've got 2 episodes left. A lot unfolds in this 4th episode. Sarah, tell me your thoughts about this one.
Yeah, you nailed it. A lot happens in this episode. And just in keeping with this show's ability to answer questions that it had led us to ask, this episode does that as well. We were both excited, especially you, to see more of Andre. And in this, we get to learn more about who he is and his past. And that's all so effective in building even more empathy for this character that we already just enjoyed spending time with and felt for. And then we see more of Dion's research and how people going missing really is affecting her work and how she is able to gain access to some of these things that someone like Michael might not be able to. So she is seeing what's happening in a larger scope than he is. And that rift between them is continuing to grow. And then one of the biggest things that we were wondering was, how is everybody going to meet? And we get to see 4 out of the 5 end up in a single location by the end of this episode, which I think is going to lead to a fascinating opening of the next episode. So all in all, a lot happens. The plot is pushed forward. We learn more about these characters. And I'm really excited to see how this continues to build on this really good foundation that's already been laid.
Yes. I think one of the big things that happens this episode that you mentioned is they all meet each other. And we've been waiting and wondering to see how that's going to happen. I love the detail that they all meet each other and Michael is not there. The one who is theoretically the center of gravity for trying to find and make contact with all of them. The one who has the most information too is also not there. So it poses this really fun question that we'll, I'm sure, find out in episode 5, which is, now that each of these 4 other people that are part of this 5-person crew have collided with each other, but they only have limited knowledge of the full picture of what's going to happen and the stakes and who the hooded beings are and all of that. They have only the little snippets of details that Michael's barely been able to get across to them in their very brief interactions that we've seen unfold over the past 4 episodes. So how is this conversation going to go? I would say maybe Sabrina has the most context about the stakes and why it's important, and maybe has begun to understand. So it'll be interesting to see who who helps facilitate this very interesting conversation. And then, of course, we end episode 4 with them meeting, but Taser pulling out his gun on them. So, and then it's cut to black, ending credits. So, I am so curious to see how this interaction is going to go. How does this team truly become a team, and what will be potentially a bumpy ride for us to get there? What I've loved so far too is that every episode in this series has picked up right where the previous episode left off. And so we get a cliffhanger, but we also immediately get to be satisfied in that cliffhanger. So, like, we end episode 3 with the whole Sabrina and Shar and the alleyway and the dude interaction. And then we start episode 4 right where that left off, like literally like seconds afterwards. And so far the show has built trust with us that it's going to pick up right where they left off, at the house with Taser's gun pulled. All of them got their amber eyes going, and now we will see how this conversation unfolds.
Yes, I love that too. And I think it's so smart, especially in a show that's streaming. It just makes sense to do it like that. And this show, all of the episodes came out on the same day too. So if you want to binge all of these, it just feels like you are listening to or watching like one continuous story rather than having to like break it up into chapters. And I think that that's a really smart choice given just how streaming works these days, and how many of us just love to binge a show. So I love that. It's so fun. And like you said, I am excited to watch the next episode because I know we're going to be in that room, and I want to know what is going to happen next, because I almost thought when they were doing all of their Amber Eyes situation that was like hey, we're cool. I have a power too. Like, we should be friends. Almost like a secret handshake, but with your eyes. But maybe Taser doesn't see it that way, and we don't know what's going on in his head. So I'm so curious to see what's going to happen next.
A secret handshake with your eyes.
But honestly, though, like, that's how I viewed it. I was like, oh, yeah, you guys will all be friends now, right? And maybe not. I don't know.
Well, what's also great about this moment of when they're meeting each other is that they all are in an incredibly emotional state. Like, every single one of them. Rodney just saw his best friend get absolutely pummeled and is like reeling from the emotions of that. We see Taser coming for revenge and wanting to seek justice for Tiny. So he's all riled up. Andre is in this desperate state to try and like make a way for himself so that he can provide for his son. And so he's feeling the weight of everything that we've experienced over the course of episode 4, which is titled with him. So we got to see his journey too. And obviously Sabrina and Shar are reeling from everything just happened a couple hours ago with the alleyway encounter, but then also they are in this like frenetic state from having endured like bullets getting shot at them and worrying about where Craze is and all this kind of stuff. So it'll be fascinating because it's such an important moment for them, for this team to come together. But then we as the viewers have seen them all individually experience so much. And so all of their emotions and adrenaline and fears and ambitions are all like at max volume, which I think will also make for a really interesting conversation too, because they're on a very, very volatile state right now.
Yeah. So who is going to be able to break through that? Who will be able to be the voice of reason? Because the four of them are all strangers. And so there's no trust built up there. There's no empathy built up there. There's no relationship. So who is going to be able to step in and be like, hey, let's not murder each other. Let's all find a way to escape. So I'm so excited to watch the next episode. This is how you do cliffhangers. This show is nailing that aspect so well.
Yes, it's so good. And there's been so much like build up too to this moment that has laid the right stakes, the right foundations, the right details for us to land at this point and then really feel the weight of the question mark of like, how will they interact? Because the other detail that I think the show has done a great job of is we've seen Michael try and make contact and get them to get on board with this mission, and every single one of them have said no. I think the only person that he hasn't interacted with is Andre yet, but
Mm-hmm.
every other person has been like, I don't know, I don't really know what to do with my power, or I've got my own other things that I'm trying to tackle right now. Like, thank you, great to hear you out. I'm gonna go live my life now. Cool. Thank you. Goodbye, stranger. Like they have all um, rejected the proposals that Michael has to be like, let's go find the others. There's going to be people coming after us. We need to protect ourselves. They've all kind of turned their heads at it. And so we know that they're also going into this conversation without this natural like inclination to become a team and try to like, fight these hypothetical bad guys that they don't even really know that much about. And so Michael's also not here to like rally them around that. So this could go so many different directions, and I think the openness of those possibilities is really really fun, and the show's done an amazing job giving us all of the seeds along the way to know what the headspace is for each of these characters.
And I love that this really just subverts our expectations. For the past few episodes, we've even been talking about like, how is Michael going to bring everybody together? Like, how is he going to build this team? And the show is, again, it's so smart. It's defying all of these superhero tropes. And I love that, because this isn't a leader bringing this team together. This show is going in a different direction. And all of these people, through all of these different life circumstances, just happen to end up in this point at the same time. And we'll see what happens from there, because the show is just doing so good at setting up an expectation and then choosing to go in another direction, which is always just so much fun to see.
Yes, I love the point you made around there not being a center of gravity, a leader that's bringing them all together. Because I think that is the model that we've typically seen is there's either this like overarching organization that essentially recruits everyone to come together to go do a thing, or it's that model that you talked about, which is we've got an incredibly charismatic leader who rallies the forces together and they all join in to tackle some big thing. And the show is really saying these are really ordinary people and they are all equals at this point. They're all dealing with their own separate things, but how will they individually choose to buy in and come together? And it's not one person influencing them all to come around this mission, but it's potentially each of them choosing and making that choice for themselves, for the people they care about, for this larger goal to buy in. Like no one is lobbying for them. They are choosing to come together and they are all needed in order to make this happen as well, which I think is also really cool. So it's a lot less like hierarchical and a lot more flat in how this is emerging and how this team gets formed, which I think is a really amazing way to showcase how teams come together. It's not always for some, rallying around some charismatic leader at the center, but hey, we can just choose to come together and we all have equal parts in making this success, making this a thing together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll see. I mean, we know that in 3 months they're working together, but I wonder how long it takes of that 3-month span for them to come together. You know, it's in, we might expect them to just like, oh yeah, let's sign on, but these characters haven't been doing that. So what is it going to take? What is going to be the inciting incident that gets them to be like, oh wait, something's going on here? And I think I'm really looking forward to the information sharing bit where, you know, Rod had the encounter with that hooded figure, and then Sabrina and Shar had that encounter with Kadeem. And so both of them have had the experience of somebody coming after them. So I wonder, will they be able to like cooler heads prevail, and then let's talk about what's going on here. And maybe that can get them to come together. I don't know. I just feel like there's going to need to be some event that happens for them to team up, because none of them seem to incline to do that right now. So I'm just, again, I'm curious to see what that is going to be. This show is continuing to just lay these seeds and lay this foundation, and we get to just see what happens next.
Well, it's cool because I think you've used the metaphor and described this show so far as like a puzzle. Like we're collecting all of our little pieces into our little basket, and we're waiting to see how they're all going to get pieced together. So all of those pieces of information that each of them individually have is going to be interesting. And I would add the discoveries that Dion's making as well to the context of like, no, let's really think about like there might be something far bigger than us than that's behind this whole thing. And so she has her little piece that will also round out the full story. But one of the things that I thought was so cool about the kind of the centerpiece of that final action sequence at the end of this episode around the house is that we've always been aware that all of their lives are somehow like interconnected in some way, and there's these chance serendipitous interactions that we've seen them have. But it's neat to see how really all of their threads do intertwine so closely by the end here. Like they are all
Mm-hmm.
showing up at this house with Craze and his crew and Masha and like all of that. They are all somehow connected to in their own specific ways. Some because they're coming to raid it, some for revenge, some because they used to date one of the guys, some because, you know, like they all have some reason to be here. And for the longest time we've seen all of their threads like going on, and then we see them somehow like lightly collide with each other. But then it was neat to see the way that the show and the writers braided all of their thread lines together in this way that like actually does make a lot of sense. And I, as it was unfolding and they're all talking about how they need to show up at his house at one time, I'm like, this actually makes a lot of sense. Sometimes when writers do this, it feels a little bit cheesy. Like there's one of the few threads that like are there, but it's like really kind of like, you kind of squint your eyes at it and you just look like, I can kind of see how you got there, but it doesn't really, I don't buy it fully. But in this case, every thread line makes so much sense why they are going to be at this house at this specific time. And that all falling into place in such a specific way and all intertwining so beautifully was like oddly so satisfying to watch and to begin to like realize as that scene was beginning to unfold.
And I don't know about you, but I was ready for Crazy to be Andre's friend that he picked up and is the reason why he went to jail. Like that's what I was ready for, cuz like so far, with the exception of his son, Andre doesn't like really have a connection to Craze, except his friend frequents that house, and then his son is trying to be groomed maybe by these guys in Crazy's crew. So I was ready for that connection piece there. But the show doesn't go that direction. But I do think it's fascinating that the other four have a pretty solid link to that house. The one who doesn't is Michael. And I find that really interesting. And again, it goes in the face of this idea of Michael being the leader that's bringing them all together. these four came together for an entirely different reason. They weren't planning to come together, but here we are because of life and circumstances and everything. So I really appreciate how we've seen their lives are connected. Like, we've learned about Crazy through all of these other conversations. We've heard Taser talk about him, we've heard Shar talk about him, and it's just been these little connection points, and episode by episode, scene by scene, they've just kind of built toward each other, and now all of these threads are colliding in a way that just feels organic and feels right. Like you were saying, it didn't feel cheesy or forced, but it felt like a natural uh, extension of where the story was going.
Which is really a difficult balance to strike because I feel like it could have been really cheesy really fast. Like you mentioned, the like, oh, the person that Andre picked up was happens to have been crazed. Like that like almost it's so coincidental and so serendipitous that you're like, okay, this was very strategically written to help the plot and I can kind of see through it. But I love that like two out of the four of them have a like very direct link. And then the other two somehow end up there because of some other reason. So one of them is through Spud and some of his drug dealings within that territory. And then for Andre, he's kind of like loosely connected, but then it makes sense why he would show up there because he's got his friend that says, hey, there's this whole bunch of stuff for you to go and take and claim for your own so that you can provide for your son. And because we've been on the emotional journey with Andre, we also understand and we can see why he would be compelled to go and show up and take the bait from his friend to of this proposed scheme. And so it's smart that not every single one of them somehow has this perfectly direct link to Craze in this house, but two of them do, two of them don't, and two of them are serendipitously there, but we've believed their motivations enough at this point that we understand that yes, they would somehow have ended up there. Like it fits in line with the choices that they're making to be there. So you're right. Had all four of them somehow been so directly linked with this, I think we would have maybe, called BS a little bit. Like, it makes for a good story, but that groundedness, that believability that makes the story even more exciting just wouldn't have been there as fully. And the show is doing a great job and understands that that balance needs to be there.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And while we're here, we got to talk about your guy. We got to talk about Andre. You had been
Andre.
so excited about this episode,
Oh,
wanting to learn more
yes.
about him. What did you think?
Oh my gosh. This show knows how to rip my heart out of my chest. When he begins, well, okay, to zoom out for a second, I just think it's so like this show is so in tune with how people make decisions because Andre is only tempted by his friend's proposed scheme after his moment of vulnerability and this potential sense of hope that he had with that employer to
Mm-hmm.
finally share and be honest and like just try something different. He's tried this other way to not tell his employers and then he's waiting to get fired and he's gone through that so many times. And this moment where we get to see him in that job interview and he's so vulnerable and he opens up so much and kind of like just lays it all out there and is kind of saying like, look, like this is my story, please give me a chance, and for him to get that call later where he doesn't get the job, it's just crushing. And at that point you can understand that his headspace is like, well, I don't, it feels like there's no other way out, and so I have to find another way. And he has that whole conversation which I think is again really smart of the show to for him to share about like feeling like a bad father and feeling that shame about not being able to provide for your 15-year-old son. Like, so we really understand everything he's experiencing. So by the point we get to in the episode where he's beginning to be very tempted to make this bad decision and to go after all of the loot at Craze's house, you're like, I really get it, and I feel for you. I want to jump into my screen and stop you from doing it. But you can really understand how he could get to that point. And just, it's so tough because we've heard his story now, and it was a series of him being in the wrong place at the wrong time. And so he's so earnest, and he has tried to do good and to do right and to do everything in the most honorable way, that you feel for him. And so to see him begin to descend into this potential dangerous pathway was like really great, like narrative tension for me as a viewer, because I care so much about this character, and to see him potentially make this decision that's going to change his life and his opportunities, and just like steep him into more of what he's trying to run from, was tough to watch, but really effective. So I'm like so glad,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, that Al showed up, because I was like, okay, thank God, like he didn't make this bad decision and potentially get killed or get caught or whatever. Like, he's gonna go be a superhero now with his 3 new friends. So I was so pleased to see everyone show up.
Oh, I love it. But I really appreciated that. I mean, I love the way that his story unfolded in this
Yeah,
episode. It's
so
so
good.
good, but I really loved that moment in the interview. And as
Hmm.
he was sharing his story, I was like, "Oh, wow. Yeah, he's being honest. So he's going to get the job." Like I
Mm-hmm.
was set. I was ready. I was like, "Yes, this is going to be so satisfying. This is a character that we're rooting for. He's trying to do the right thing, and his honesty will be rewarded." And this show is not about you feeling good. This show is about telling the truth. And I love
Mm.
that in these really subtle ways, Supacell is going, hey, we got some problems. Let's discuss them. And so taking the time to really highlight the difficulty for formerly incarcerated people to find work. It's so hard to do. It is next to impossible at times. And so taking the time in this episode to really highlight that truth that affects so many people every single year, I think is so important. And this show isn't pulling any punches. And I just love how smart the show is being to build empathy with a character and then use our empathy with them and us going on the journey with them to point out a very real facet of our society that we might not intersect with that much. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's so smart the way that it's written, and just bringing awareness to these things that we might not have to think about. And I think that that's super valuable.
Mm-hmm. No, that's so good. That's so good. And I love that when he's sharing his story, there's such an important character revealing, defining moment in that story that he shares, because he says at one point, like, he didn't try to correct uh and reveal the
Mm-hmm.
truth, because one, he didn't want to snitch, but then two, he believed that at some point, like, the truth would come out and he would be released. And so there's like two aspects of who Andre is as a person, and how he's wired, and what his value systems is. That one, he wants to honor the people in his community and his friendships and relationships. Like, he is not going to rat them out for his own gain, for his own purposes. But then two, there was this at one point in his life, this hopefulness about the system in place. And now he's seen how the system and the policies in place are really taking so much from him. And so I love that in that very short scene and the story that he tells, we get to really learn a lot about who Andre is, the honor that he chooses to carry at the cost of sometimes what's selfishly beneficial for him. But then, two, there is this like natural inclination to hope and trust and believe in the larger systems at play that is so much a part of his wiring too. And so I love that we get to see the windows into those aspects about who he is and what his value systems are that he chooses to live by, that are part of his nature. I love that we get to see that. And so when he makes choices now that like maybe he's been like a little bit more cynical and hardened by this. But we understand who he is at the core and where he's come from.
Yeah, and you just want him to make a different decision, but you also understand the desperation that he feels and the shame
Yeah.
that he feels. Oh, this episode is so good at showing us that, like that whole sequence in his flat where,
Mm-hmm.
oh my gosh, the way that that unfolds, and he's about to make a violent choice potentially with these bailiffs because he's not sure what else to do, and then AJ walks in, and AJ is willing to give up all these nice things that his dad just bought him, and Andre then hands over the cash, and you can just feel him just like covered in shame, and he's just hanging his head and he doesn't know what to do, and then he isolates from his son. They were supposed to like hang out later that night, and shame just isolates him, and it makes sense why he would feel driven to this place where he's willing to rob a drug dealer. I'm like, Andre, can we pick maybe a slightly safer way to go? I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
man. I don't know that I would jump straight to robbing a drug dealer, but that's cool. Now you can meet your other friends. But man, you have so much empathy for this character, and you get it. And even though I
Mm-hmm.
was like, no, Andre, this is a terrible plan. Please do anything else. I don't have a constructive idea to offer him. So, like, I get it.
Okay, what I love about that too is that his friend first proposes, "Why don't you just rob more of the ATMs?"
Right?
And he goes, "No, like I'm not gonna do that. I'm choosing not to do
Yeah.
that." Which I definitely thought when we first met Andre, I was like, bro, like rob some more of them. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like I was
Yeah. Go for
expecting him
it.
to just like go to town for a hot second and then maybe realize later, like, okay, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. And but the fact that he only does it once and then is like, I should not be doing this. This is not okay. It's also a testament to who Andre is. But then his friend says, "Oh, but I've always known that you've always said like you would want to rob the drug dealers because they are, wreaking havoc within the communities, recruiting the youth, blah, 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 blah." So, like, that is more okay to him in his systems
Mm-hmm.
of what is okay and what is not okay, what is better versus not better for the goal that he needs, which is to be able to provide. Like, this is his frame of what is more just. And that in and of itself is a fascinating window into who Andre is and how he views the world. But he initially, like his friends proposing, like, go do your thing, dude. Get the money from the ATMs directly.
Yeah.
But for some reason in his mind, that feels like money that is untainted. It is for just other people's money. It's the bank's money, whatever it is. Like that is not okay. But this other, you know, set of money and loot is more okay. And that's really interesting for who he is. I was like, I would rob
Mm-hmm.
at least a couple more before your conscience sets in, but his conscience sets in so early. I was so impressed.
Mm-hmm. Ugh, this show does so much because this episode is 50-ish minutes, and it packs all of that in here. It's so efficient in its storytelling, and the way that it's peeling back these layers of these characters. It's very efficient, and we love a good, efficient story. This Supacell is killing it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Speaking of some of our favorite characters, we get to see a fabulous moment from your girl, Sabrina, who wants to turn herself in and honestly is like pretty much about to turn herself in, which I think is also so character defining for who she is. Tell me more about your thoughts on that.
Oh my gosh. I was like, Sabrina, what are you doing? Don't do it. This is not the move. Like, if you're feeling guilty, maybe we can find something else to do to assuage your guilt. But I really loved that choice because it makes so much sense for the character. It shows like her own morality and her own goodness, and at the same time because there was no murder reported, because there is no crime scene, at the same time, it's also showing us more about this shadowy organization that we don't know anything about, really. So it's a two birds one stone situation, and I thought that that was so smart, and it creates tension between Sabrina and Shar, which just leads to them being at the house ultimately. So it was it was so smart on so many levels to have her make that choice and go through with it, which was amazing. I feel like
It was
in a lot of
incredible.
shows somebody will just think about it, or maybe they'll like get halfway there, or maybe they walk into the police station and there's this really dramatic moment where
They
like
turn
the
around.
police will be like, hey, what can I help you with? And then the person's like, uh, and they can't do it, and then they walk away awkwardly. But like she was
It's ready.
committed, she
Yeah.
was ready. And so I
Uh-huh.
just, that speaks so much to her character and what she's all about. It was great.
Hmm. And you know what? Like, she had so many reasons not to, you know? Like, Char's pleading with her, like, don't leave me behind. Like, don't let me be alone. Like, please, you can't do this. Like, what am I going to do without you? And you're like, okay, that's pretty compelling. Like, cool, I'm sold. I'm bought in. I won't turn myself in. But, like, even fighting all of that love and care that she has and this other competing desire to protect and be there for her sister. Despite all of that, her sense of conscience has trumped and overcome that strong desire in her as well. Like that's very hard to do. But we've seen her time and time again choose the right thing, choose to do what she knows deep down is just, is good, and is righteous, and she's always honored that. And it's fascinating because it's her immediate reaction to, like, and I love that, like, we don't just get thrown into meeting this character and then all of a sudden she murdered someone and then she's gonna go like turn herself in. We get the progression of the first time that she accidentally throws Kevin. Her natural reaction is just stay with him to make sure that he's okay. And
Mm-hmm.
so by the time she gets to this point where she wants to turn herself in, it feels like, yes, this is right for the character. This is believable to us because we've worked our way here instead of hitting us with this right up front. So I love that progression that the show's taken us through and given us the time to get to that point where we see this moment with Sabrina.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And it's all consistent with her character. And each episode, it really does feel like peeling back layers on each of these characters. And
Mm-hmm.
some episodes are obviously more intensive than others, and we learn more about a character. But I feel like each character in each episode, we get layers peeled back. And it's so smart the way that works. Like you said, it's not this immediate, like, we see them do something and then they do something else and then that's it. But it's this slow building upon. It's like how you get to know somebody else. Like you learn little bits about them as you go through things with them, and that's what the show is doing with us, with all of these characters as they are dealing with this crazy impossible situation that they've suddenly found themselves in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. That's so true. That's so true. I love the comparison to like meeting people in real life because really, these are our friends. We're meeting them, we're getting to know them, we're starting to uncover who they are, and then we're seeing them in way more dramatic situations than we see anyone that we've ever met in real life, ever.
Right.
Okay. Any other last big thoughts before we give out some awards?
I think just a couple of quick things. There's so much in this episode. We've barely like scratched the surface of my notes, but I think it's fascinating that we learn that Sabrina and Char's dad has sickle cell, and so that's
Yeah.
another connection point. It's Michael, Andre, and now Sabrina, all in their family have that disease. So just another little interesting thing that this show keeps doing. And then, like we mentioned a little bit earlier, Dion and her continued
Yay.
discoveries about what's actually going on. And I'm very curious because she has pieces of this puzzle that nobody else does. And her bridge to this group really is Michael. And they're
Mm-hmm.
having a rough time right now. And so I
Mm.
love that it's creating tension within their relationship, but it's also creating tension within the show as a whole
The goal, yeah.
because
That's good. Mm.
she without her information, are they going to be able to do what they need to do? And so I'm curious to see how the show handles that and potentially uses that relational rift between Dion and Michael to create additional tension in the show.
Mm. Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. It feels like the chasm is getting larger and larger between this crew and their
Yes.
goal and the information that they
Yeah.
need to complete their puzzle to go do what they need to do. Yeah, that's so good. Okay. I know there's always so much to talk about, but let's give out some awards. Our first category is the SVP. So, this is the super valuable player given to a character in this episode that is deserving of this award. Who is your choice for this episode?
I want to give it to Dion when she and her colleague are meeting with Mrs. Johnson in the restaurant, and
Mm-hmm.
Dion is able to read the room and respect boundaries. And for that, I think she is the SVP.
She is incredible, honestly. Like
Yes.
she's so wise. I love that she handles that so calmly, but also articulates like we just want to help you. We care about you. We want to help you. We will go right now, but like reaffirming like our intentions is always to put you first and doing that in such a calm way I thought was really neat. And then there's another really great moment with her where she communicates so clearly to Michael about him, being rude
Mm-hmm.
and being disrespectful. And so therefore, like what happened? Like why did you also leave? Like she's so calm without like denying her emotions, but also communicating clearly for the people that need it about how she's feeling and what they did wrong and how they can it's just she is the emotional intelligence and empathy and wisdom on this woman is incredible.
Mm-hmm. Oh, she's great, honestly.
So good.
Like that's another reason why I want like her and Michael to like sort out their rift between them is because I just want to see more of Dion. She's just excellent.
Mm-hmm. My choice for SVP is for Sabrina for turning herself in and actually
Mm-hmm.
going through with it or planning to. So
Yes,
good.
that was my other choice. I was
Mm,
debating between those two. So,
incredible. Yeah.
it's so good.
And you also see the turmoil, like sometimes these characters that like turn themselves in, they're like so convicted, and they're like so righteously good. And like you see her really struggle with it. And for her to still choose it, I'm like, wow, you go, girl. That is incredible.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, she deserves this award too.
Yeah.
It's great.
Okay. The next category is achievement and intensity. Lots of candidates for this award in this episode. What is your choice?
Yeah, I got to give it to that final moment in the house, you
Mm-hmm.
know? It's just everything has built up to this moment and then just chaos erupts in this house and then we don't know what's going to happen next. So I think it's that like chaos moment paired with a cliffhanger that makes it extra intense.
So good. Yeah, I have the same moment jotted down, which is the ending, basically the ending scene of this episode. But I think specifically, like we were talking about earlier, they don't end on their secret handshake with their eyes. They end on the reveal of that plus this
Mhm.
this act from Taser that kind of creates a feeling of tension of like, oh, this might not be as smooth as we think it's going to go. And that cliffhanger, that intensity is also just really, really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. I also, quick little shout out, Taser's crew shows up to the house on electric scooters, and I just think that is such a sleigh. It's so cool. There's like tense music going, and they just have their little lights on their electric scooters in the crowd of them as they're like rolling through with their red bandanas. It was so funny to me.
I love it. You got to travel in style, and they're all matching. They're all on brand. It's great.
Yes, rolling up on their electric scooters at night. It's great. The next category is the Spitting Fire Award. Who, and what line is going to get this award from you this week?
I want to give it to Shar for
Mm.
when Michael has approached them and Sabrina is listening to him and Shar is trying to get her to stop, and she says, "Are you even listening to this guy? He's chatting shit." And I was like, "Yeah, girl, he sure is chatting
That
shit."
is
So
so
you call him
good.
out.
So many of our Spitting Fire awards, I think, are percentage wise going to go to Shar this season, and it's great. She's got so many good one
Mhm.
liners.
Yeah, it's either going to be,
Um,
I think, Shar or members of Taser's
of
crew.
Taser's
Like,
crew, they're so fun. Yeah. I am going to give this award to that really tense park scene between Taser and Craze. And Craze is basically saying, like, come on, brother, like, let's take on the world together. I need you back. And then Taser goes, you're not my brother.
hmm
You're
Ooh, it's so
so,
good. He says,
yeah.
"Shot my brother," and I
Yeah.
went, "Oh,
Yeah.
that's so good."
Uh huh. Uh huh. All right. Looking ahead, we've got 2 episodes left before we land at this plane. What are you excited to see?
I'm ready to pick up right where we left off.
Yep.
Let's see what happens. Who will be the
Mm-hmm.
voice of reason? Who will prevent them from murdering each other? Like,
Yeah.
what is going to happen in this really, really intense scene? Um, and then I think beyond that, I'm again still really curious about this shadowy organization and um, is the shadowy organization connected to the hooded figures? Are they part of the same foe? Are they two separate foes?
Right?
And then just another question that I have is Crazy seems to be like almost like a gravitational like force in this. He almost seems to be like at the center of a lot of what's going on. It's not Michael at the
Yeah.
center of this, but it almost seems like Crazy is. And so I'm wondering if we're going to see more of him and what role he might play in the larger story of this season.
Yeah. I think that's really good intuition because he kind of he comes out of nowhere, like he just kind of mentioned a
Mm-hmm.
couple times in the first 2 episodes, and then we get to see him show up to that little brawl that happens in the neighborhood. But he's played a huge role in this episode and been kind of a centrifugal force for all of these different characters in his orbit. So yeah, I think he's also just like an incredibly like captivating screen presence, which I think is really
Oh yeah.
important for, yeah, some of those really really great scenes. I have on my list just now what, like, how will this team become a team now that they've met? So that's exciting. um what is Taser gonna do next? It's basically like we better pick up on where we left off, in right in the house, right in that moment. I'm so curious to see what all these characters will do. And then I'm really curious to see how we will use this limited runway that we have left. With 2 episodes left, where will this show go and what will it choose to prioritize for this story? Because there's actually like so much. Like, it kind of feels like it could be the first third of a whole movie. And so we only have 2 episodes left. Where will we choose to center the conflict around? What information will we learn? And then what will the show choose to just leave out or leave as kind of open question marks for us to maybe explore in more content, but also maybe we don't need to know? And how will the show choose to make those choices? I think it's going to be really, really interesting for where we go next. So we've got limited runway, so I'm just curious to see how we will use it.
Yeah, and this show has been so strategic so far. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what these last two episodes entail because it
Mm-hmm.
it also the show has a way of keeping us on our toes. So where might we go that we're maybe not expecting?
Yep. Yep. So true. And we will find out. We will definitely be here to find out because we need to know what happens next in that house. So Yeah, we'll definitely be covering the next episode real soon. Well, in the meantime, this was our review and discussion of episode 4 of Supacell. You can find it available to stream on Netflix. Thank you for listening to today's episode of TVNS. Our name sums it up. We're big fans of TV and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories, so everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today as we continued our journey through Supacell. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating or review letting us know your thoughts about episode 4. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at TVNSPod, or you can email us at tvnspod@gmail.com. We will be back very soon to discuss all of the things that will unfold in episode 5 of this show. We can't wait. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk again in a couple of days.